Carl Jung warned about this. 11 signs you're vibrating too high for most to handle. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where we dive deep into the truths that awaken your soul. In today's video, we'll explore 11 powerful signs that you're vibrating at a spiritual frequency. Most people can't handle a level of consciousness that Carl Jung believed only the rarest individuals would ever reach. This isn't just about feeling different. It's about realizing you were never meant to fit in. As you listen, think about how these signs show up in your own life. Are you experiencing this shift? Do you feel like the world around you no longer understands your depth? If so, share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how your spiritual journey is unfolding. Let's begin. 1. Subtle spiritual awakening begins. There's a moment in every man's life when something begins to stir quietly beneath the surface. Carl Jung spoke of this shift, not as a grand explosion, but as a subtle spiritual awakening. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or dramatic signs. Instead, it begins when the world around you starts to feel hollow. The same conversations that used to excite you now feel like noise. The small talk, the games of status, the rules you once followed, they all start to lose their grip. You find yourself pulling back, not because you're angry or bitter, but because your soul is finally speaking louder than the crowd. You're tuning in to a different frequency, one most people can't even hear. This isn't about superiority, it's about alignment. You begin to feel that there's something deeper beyond the surface of everyday life, something that calls you inward. And that calling doesn't always come with clear instructions. It can feel isolating at first. Friends may say you're changing, that you've grown distant. But what they don't understand is that you're waking up to a truth that refuses to be silenced. You're not just thinking differently. You're vibrating differently. This frequency Jung understood reveals the spiritual man hidden beneath layers of societal programming. You're no longer reacting to everything outside of you because you've begun observing the world through the lens of inner sovereignty. The things that once triggered you now pass through you without sticking. And here's the key. That's not weakness, that's spiritual power. In modern life, where we're rewarded for constant stimulation and shallow validation, a man who becomes still, discerning, and energetically sovereign is a threat to the matrix of distraction. You might start sensing when conversations are dishonest, when environments drain your spirit, or when people mask their pain behind performance. That's the gift and the burden of a true spiritual awakening. You become sensitive, but not fragile. Aware, but not overwhelmed. And while many will misread your silence, your absence, or your energy as something to fear or fix, what they're really witnessing is a man who no longer needs external approval to validate his inner knowing. So I ask you, when did you first feel that inner shift? That quiet moment when your soul whispered, "There's more than this." Leave a comment and share your experience. It may be the very story that gives another man permission to wake up. In a world that fears depth, your awakening isn't a breakdown, it's your breakthrough. 2. The persona feels like a mask. You know that unsettling feeling when you walk into a room, smile politely, and go through the motions, yet deep down, it feels like you're playing a role in someone else's script. That's not just awkwardness, it's a sign. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social mask we wear to fit in, to belong, to survive. But when you're undergoing spiritual growth, that mask starts to crack. What used to help you navigate the world being agreeable, smiling on command, saying the right thing now feels fake, even suffocating. It's not that you're trying to rebel or reject society. It's that your soul is waking up, and it no longer wants to be hidden behind an outdated costume. This isn't just some psychological glitch. It's a deep spiritual shift. When your inner self begins to awaken, the ego, which once kept you safe, starts to panic. It doesn't know how to operate without the mask. That discomfort? That's your truth rising. You're not broken. You're breaking free. One man I know worked in corporate finance for over 20 years. He wore tailored suits, closed million-dollar deals, and hosted elegant dinner parties. But every time he looked in the mirror, he didn't recognize the man staring back. One day, sitting in traffic, he turned off the podcast and just sat with the silence, and in that moment, tears started flowing. Not from sadness, but from the realization that he was done pretending. That was the beginning of his spiritual awakening. Today, he teaches mindfulness and helps others navigate the same transition. So let me ask you, do you ever feel like your outer self no longer matches your inner world? Do you feel tired? Not because you are physically exhausted, but because you are carrying a version of yourself that is no longer authentic. If so, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not lost. You are evolving. You are moving toward authenticity, toward the life your soul came here to live. In spirituality, this moment is sacred. It is the turning point where spiritual growth requires you to step out of the roles others have assigned you and into the truth you have always carried. It is uncomfortable. It is chaotic. But it is the most liberating process you will ever experience. If your ego is shaking, if your personality feels like a costume, take it as a sign. You are vibrating at a frequency that is too real, too powerful for the false self to survive. What is the lesson here? Don't be afraid of discomfort. Listen to it. Let it guide you. Because when you take off the mask, you create space for your true self to breathe. And that, my friend, is when the real spiritual journey begins. Comment below. I'm ready for this wonderful journey. 3. New interests and perceptions develop. When Carl Jung spoke of the unconscious, he wasn't just referring to hidden thoughts or forgotten memories. He was pointing to a vast inner world, a spiritual dimension that, once tapped into, changes how you see everything. This is why one of the most powerful signs that you're vibrating at a higher spiritual frequency is that your interests and perceptions begin to radically shift. You're no longer pulled in by surface-level distractions or conventional entertainment that once occupied your time. Instead, you find yourself captivated by mystical teachings, drawn to the timeless wisdom of ancient texts, and resonating with deeper philosophies that most people overlook or find confusing. Maybe you've picked up the works of Rumi, Khalil Gibran, or Carl Jung himself, and their words suddenly feel like echoes of your own thoughts. Complex poetry that once seemed abstract now stirs something inside you. Something familiar, like a forgotten truth rising to the surface. And it doesn't stop there. Your senses start expanding. You begin to feel energy in a room without anyone speaking. You sense people's emotions without them saying a word. You notice synchronicities that others dismiss as coincidences, but you know deep within that nothing is random anymore. This shift isn't just intellectual, it's spiritual. It's a form of spiritual wisdom. And once you taste it, there's no going back to how things used to be. You begin to see beyond appearances, beyond the physical world, into an invisible current that connects everything. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Who looks outside? Dreams. Who looks inside? Awakes. The question is, have you felt this shift in your own life? Do you find yourself less interested in superficial conversations and more curious about the mystery of existence itself? Do you find your awareness of reality evolving in ways that make you both more alert and more alone? Because the truth is, when you begin to vibrate too high for most people, you will often walk alone, but never in vain. That solitude is sacred. It is the space where transformation is nurtured, where spiritual awakening is deepened. And yes, this path can be lonely, but it is also liberating. So ask yourself, what are you drawn to now? What used to frustrate or confuse you? What does your growing awareness reveal about your soul's true longing? Let this journey remind you that you are not broken or lost. You are simply tuning into a higher frequency, one that Carl Jung warned would separate you from the crowd, but would ultimately bring you closer to your true self. Stay curious, stay open, and let your thirst for spiritual wisdom guide you. Comment below, "I choose spiritual wisdom." 4. Dreams and symbols gain significance. There comes a moment in every man's spiritual awakening when the boundary between the waking world and the dream world begins to blur, not with fantasy, but with meaning. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This is not just poetic. It's the quiet unfolding of a deeper truth that many miss. When you're vibrating at a higher frequency, your dreams are no longer random flickers of your subconscious. They become encrypted letters from your soul. They intensify, become more vivid, more symbolic, more insistent. You wake up not just remembering them, but feeling them in your bones, sensing there's something you're meant to uncover. And suddenly, the dreams that once seemed nonsensical now feel like sacred texts begging for interpretation. You start noticing patterns, animals, numbers, places that speak to something ancient inside you. Have you ever had a dream you couldn't shake for days? Not because it was scary, but because it felt like a message? That's not just coincidence. That's your unconscious reaching up to meet your consciousness halfway. Jung referred to this as the language of symbols, where the psyche reveals itself not in logical sentences, but in metaphors that echo across myth, religion, and the collective unconscious. If you find yourself waking up at 3:33 in the morning after dreaming of owls, or walking down a street only to see a word from your dream spelled out on a billboard, you're not losing your mind, you're tuning in. And that tuning in is not passive. It's a sacred participation with the intelligence of the universe. That's what it means to vibrate at a frequency most people can't understand. You're not just receiving symbols, you're translating them into insight. This is a powerful marker of your spiritual growth, a shift that signals you've entered the terrain of the spiritually awakened. It's no longer about blind faith, it's about direct experience. It's about seeing the inner and outer world mirror each other in ways that feel too aligned to be random. In modern life, many men are conditioned to suppress this intuitive language. The boardroom doesn't reward dream interpreters. But here's the truth. Every warrior, leader, or pioneer who left a mark on this world followed an inner vision before it ever became a reality. Whether it came in a flash of insight or in a recurring dream, the call always begins in the invisible realm. So what would happen if you stopped dismissing your dreams as irrelevant and started treating them as training grounds for your awakening? What if those symbols were your ancestors speaking, your soul guiding, your future remembering itself? In a world addicted to surface-level noise, the spiritually awakened man dares to listen to the silence between symbols. He doesn't just chase success, he decodes meaning. And when he does, life stops feeling random and starts feeling aligned. So I leave you with this question. What recurring symbol or image has been haunting you lately? What dream has been knocking at the door of your consciousness, waiting to be heard? Don't ignore it. Decode it. It might just be the universe calling your name in a language that only the awakened can hear. Because in the end, spiritual awakening is not just about reaching the light. It's about learning to read the map your soul has drawn with symbols over time. Comment below. Spiritual awakening. 5. Time feels fluid and reality shifts. When you reach a certain point in your spiritual growth, something fascinating starts to happen, and you stop experiencing time the way you used to. It no longer feels like a rigid sequence of past, present, and future. Instead, time becomes more fluid, more alive. You may find yourself deeply focused in the moment, and what felt like 5 minutes turns out to be an hour, or what felt like an hour turns out to be 5 minutes. This isn't just about distraction or daydreaming. It's about entering a state of presence so deep that the usual markers of time dissolve. Carl Jung believed that as you evolve spiritually, the unconscious becomes more accessible, and that changes how we relate to our experience of reality. In fact, the boundaries between your inner world, your thoughts, dreams, and intuitions, and the outer world, what you can see, hear, and touch, begin to blur. It's almost like life is no longer happening to you, but through you. You start to notice synchronicities, small but powerful clues that your internal state is shaping your external experience. One man shared a story of being on a walk after a painful breakup, asking the universe for a sign. And right then, a song started playing from a nearby car lyrics that answered his question perfectly. These kinds of moments don't feel random. They feel spiritual, personal, and transformative. They're signs that you're awakening to something deeper. If you've ever looked at a clock and realized hours passed while you were creating, meditating, or simply feeling at peace, that's not just flow. It's a glimpse into how time bends when your vibration rises. So let me ask you, have you noticed time behaving strangely in your life lately? Do certain days feel timeless while others drag? That's your consciousness stretching beyond the ordinary and tapping into something eternal. This is not a phase of confusion, but an invitation to greater awareness. Spirituality teaches us that as we grow inwardly, the old metrics like time, achievement, or control lose their grip. Instead, your compass shifts toward alignment, meaning, and presence. And yes, not everyone will understand this shift. When you're vibrating at this higher frequency, it's hard to explain why time feels different or why the veil between the seen and unseen seems so thin. But that's the beauty of spiritual growth. It's deeply personal and often beyond logic. You begin to see life not as a timeline, but as a sacred spiral. So if you're experiencing these signs, take heart. You're not losing touch with reality. You're expanding your perception of it. And in that expansion, you're aligning with a deeper truth. Stay open, stay grounded, and trust the transformation unfolding within you, because it's real and it's yours. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 6. A sacred loneliness emerges. When you begin to awaken spiritually, there comes a subtle but undeniable shift in your relationships and how you experience connection. And one of the most profound signs that Carl Jung pointed to is what we can call a sacred loneliness. This isn't the kind of loneliness that stems from isolation or rejection. It's a different kind of quiet, a sacred solitude that emerges from within as your energy begins to vibrate at a higher frequency than those around you. You start to feel separate, not better, not above, but different. It's not because you think you're superior. In fact, it's often the opposite. You've grown more sensitive to inauthenticity, to noise, to meaningless conversations. And this sense of separation is not a flaw, it's a sign. Jung, in his teachings on individuation, described this as the moment the soul begins to step outside of the collective identity and seeks a path toward deeper inner truth. As he once said, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Have you ever sat in a room full of people and still felt alone, not because you were unloved, but because you were unseen, not understood at your core? That's sacred loneliness. And it's part of your spiritual evolution. What you're going through is not an abandonment, it's an initiation. The universe begins to strip away the old versions of connection that no longer serve the real you. Your soul craves depth, authenticity, and truth. The people you once resonated with may now feel foreign. That's not a mistake. It's spiritual wisdom in action. This loneliness pushes you inward. It sharpens your intuition. It forces you to face yourself and discover who you truly are when no one is looking. It invites you to meet your soul in silence. And in that stillness, you begin to hear your own voice again. You begin to realize you are not alone. In the cosmic sense, you are simply being pulled into alignment with something greater. You are in the process of individuation, one of Jung's most powerful concepts, where the unconscious is integrated and the true self emerges. In a world addicted to distraction and superficiality, connecting deeply with your own essence can make you feel like an outsider. But ask yourself, is it better to feel temporarily alone on the path of truth or forever lost in the crowd? Your sacred solitude is not a punishment. It is a rite of passage, and it is sacred because it leads to your liberation. So if you are feeling this deep inner shift, know that you are not broken, you are awakening. What parts of yourself are emerging in the quiet? And what truths are calling to you in this season of solitude? This is not just personal, this is spiritual. And through this, as Carl Jung warned, you are vibrating at a level that most people may not be ready to understand. But it's not your burden to carry, it's your light to honor. Comment below, I honor this light. 7. Solitude becomes sacred. They say, in the silence of solitude, the soul finds its voice. And Carl Jung echoed this truth when he wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." As you navigate your spiritual awakening, you may notice that solitude is no longer something to avoid or fear. It becomes sacred. This isn't about running from responsibilities or hiding from the world, but rather stepping into the quiet to access a deeper layer of yourself that the noise of daily life often drowns out. In this stage, your spiritual frequency shifts in such a way that you begin to feel more at home in nature than in crowds, more drawn to a silent forest than a noisy room. You find yourself craving moments alone, not because you're broken, but because your inner being is speaking to you more clearly, guiding you toward a truth that can't be accessed through words or external validation. The stillness becomes your teacher. It's in the quiet spaces, whether it's early morning walks, evenings under the stars, or simply sitting in your room without a screen, that you begin to hear insights rising from the depths of your consciousness. This is a powerful sign that you're vibrating at a level most people can't understand. Because while the world glorifies hustle and noise, you are learning to honor peace and presence. Your energy becomes more refined, sensitive, and aligned with what is real rather than what is urgent. Solitude no longer feels like loneliness. It feels like home. And yet, have you ever wondered why so many people are uncomfortable being alone with themselves? What might they discover if they allowed the silence to speak? This is the kind of spiritual wisdom Carl Jung devoted his life to exploring, and it's what makes your journey both rare and essential. If you are in this space right now, know that it's not a sign of disconnection. It's a sign of deeper alignment. And while it may feel isolating, remember that the path of spiritual awakening often requires walking alone for a while, so that your soul can catch up to your steps. Let the solitude shape you. Let it clear the noise so your inner voice can become the loudest one. In today's world, where distractions are constant and being busy is worn like a badge of honor, your decision to choose silence is not only radical, it's sacred. So ask yourself, what is silence trying to teach you right now? And are you brave enough to listen? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. 8. Shadow work begins. When your spiritual growth deepens and your energy begins to shift, there's a moment when the real work begins. Not the kind that impresses others, but the kind that reshapes the very core of who you are. One of the most powerful and uncomfortable stages of vibrating at a higher frequency is when your shadow work begins. This isn't just a psychological exercise, it's a spiritual rite of passage. Carl Jung, who coined the term the shadow, once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you reach this point, you're no longer running from the parts of yourself that once embarrassed, scared, or confused you. Instead, you start to turn around and face them, and that takes tremendous courage. Shadow work means acknowledging the anger you've buried, the shame you've masked with success, the wounds you've numbed with distractions. You begin to see that these rejected pieces aren't mistakes, they're invitations. Invitations to become whole, to grow in emotional and spiritual intelligence, and to stop performing for the world. And while this process can feel like walking through fire, it burns away the false self you've built to survive. Let me tell you about a man in his 40s I worked with, a high-achieving executive who had spent decades perfecting his public image. On the outside, he was composed, respected, and successful. But underneath, he carried unspoken grief from childhood, his father's silence, his mother's emotional volatility, the deep belief that love had to be earned. When he began his spiritual awakening, those memories started resurfacing, uninvited and relentless. He wanted to meditate for peace, but instead found himself weeping during breathwork sessions. That's when the real healing began. He stopped blaming his past and started meeting it with compassion. He didn't just analyze the pain, he embraced it. And through that embrace, he softened into someone more grounded, more real, more at peace. That's the power of shadow work. It doesn't make you perfect, it makes you whole. So let me ask you, what parts of yourself have you locked away out of fear they'd make you unlovable? What emotions do you judge in yourself but accept in others? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the doorways to your evolution. Shadow work isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about realizing you were never broken to begin with. It's a practice of integrating the hidden, not eliminating it. And in doing so, you unlock a new level of authenticity that no longer needs external validation. You stop trying to be liked, and you start trying to be real. This stage of spiritual growth is often silent and invisible, but its impact is profound. People may not understand why you are turning inward or why you are rejecting things you once accepted. That's okay. Not everyone will vibrate at your new frequency, and they shouldn't. You are becoming a deeper listener, a fuller lover, and a clearer seer. In the process, you become attractive not because you are trying, but because you are in tune. And that is the mark of true spirituality. Not how bright your light is, but how bravely you embrace your own darkness. Comment below. Darkness is not the enemy. 9. Your psychological vision expands. When your psychological vision begins to expand, something profound takes place within you. You no longer take people at face value. You start to notice the hidden motives behind their words, the subtle tensions behind their smiles, and the masks they wear to survive in a world that often demands conformity over authenticity. This is not paranoia. It's perception sharpened by awakening. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What happens when you begin to see not just your own patterns, but the unconscious motivations of others? It can feel both powerful and lonely, like you've been handed a spiritual magnifying glass that few others know exists. You may find yourself in conversations that feel hollow, surrounded by people who still operate in the realm of illusion, where roles matter more than realness. But here's the spiritual wisdom buried within that discomfort. Seeing clearly doesn't separate you from others. It actually invites deeper compassion. Because once you understand why people hide, you stop resenting the mask and start respecting the pain behind it. You've grown beyond needing to be fooled, and instead, you feel a quiet tenderness for those who still are. Think of it like this. Have you ever watched a friend repeat a toxic pattern in relationships and suddenly realized it stems from a childhood wound they haven't even acknowledged? You didn't judge them. You felt for them. That is the power of expanded psychological vision. It's not just about spotting others' blind spots. It's about honoring your own inner clarity while holding space for their unseen battles. This kind of inner awakening often marks a spiritual turning point, one that Carl Jung identified as the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming your whole, authentic self. But how do you carry this vision in a world that often rewards pretense? How do you stay open-hearted when your awareness makes you feel out of place? These are the questions that define spiritual awakening. This kind of insight can't be unlearned, and though it might isolate you temporarily, it will ultimately align you with those who are also learning to see beyond appearances. So the next time you find yourself sensing what is unsaid, sensing what others are avoiding, or noticing the tension behind someone's perfect life, don't doubt yourself. You're not overthinking. You're listening. And this depth of awareness is a sign that your soul is vibrating at a frequency that many people still can't fathom. But remember, as Carl Jung emphasized, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That journey begins with vision. So let me ask you, have you noticed this shift in yourself? Have you been seeing people differently lately, even sensing truths they never spoke? If so, perhaps it's time to honor your gift, trust your intuition, and embrace the spiritual wisdom that comes from walking the path of truth, even when others can't see what you see. Comment below. I trust my intuition. 10. You speak the language of symbols. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And this truth becomes startlingly clear when you begin to vibrate at a level that most people cannot comprehend. One of the most profound signs that you're undergoing a spiritual awakening that shifts you into a higher frequency is when you start to speak the language of symbols. This isn't something you study in a textbook. It's something that reveals itself in the quiet spaces of your soul. Suddenly, your dreams aren't just random images, they're messages. You begin to notice that recurring numbers, animals, or people aren't coincidences, but synchronistic events that feel charged with deep personal meaning. You walk into a room and feel a certain energy before anyone speaks. You read an old myth or hear a story, and something in your gut tells you it's speaking directly to your life. You're not going crazy. You're waking up to the symbolic language of the psyche that Carl Jung devoted his life to exploring. And as this internal decoding becomes second nature, you start to see every challenge, every delay, every detour as a mirror reflecting back your subconscious patterns. For men in their 30s to 60s who have spent years pursuing logic, achievement, and material structure, this spiritual shift can feel disorienting at first. But that disorientation is part of the transformation. In a world that trains us to measure success by tangible results, learning to trust the intangible intuition, energy, and dreams can feel like stepping into a different dimension. But here's the truth. Symbols have always guided humanity. From ancient warriors who interpreted omens in nature, to spiritual sages who understood archetypes as maps to the soul, decoding symbolic language is the lost skill of the spiritually awakened man. The real question is, are you willing to slow down enough to listen? Are you willing to accept that not all wisdom comes from logic, but from the whispering depths of your unconscious? When you start treating your inner world with as much reverence as your outer one, everything begins to shift. You stop reacting and start reflecting. You no longer chase meaning. You become meaning. As you engage with dreams as if they are personal myths, as you reflect on synchronicities as if the universe is nudging you, as you connect with ancient symbols and realize they mirror your current journey, you step into your true spiritual power. And while others may dismiss your insights or accuse you of overthinking, you begin to understand that spiritual awakening is less about being understood and more about being aligned. So ask yourself today, what symbols are appearing in your life? What dreams keep coming back? What patterns can no longer be dismissed as random? These are not mere curiosities. They are soul messages waiting to be read by an awakened being. In a society that is drowning in data but starving for meaning, those who can read the language of symbols will become the spiritual leaders of the future. And if you are one of them, don't dull your insight just because others haven't learned to see. You are not meant to be understood by everyone. You were born to understand yourself. That is the beginning of true spiritual wisdom. Comment below, I understand myself. 11. You embody individuation and depth. You know, there comes a point in your journey when surface-level conversations, small talk, and hollow relationships simply don't feed your soul anymore. You begin to crave something deeper, something more real. And that shift, where you turn away from shallow living and start walking the path of becoming who you truly are, is exactly what Carl Jung called individuation. It's not a buzzword or a passing phase. It's a spiritual and psychological process of aligning your outer life with your inner truth. It's about facing your shadow, integrating your wounds, and embracing the totality of your being with honesty and courage. And if this is resonating with you, chances are you're already embodying it. This isn't just some abstract idea. Think about it. Have you noticed how you've started pulling back from environments that feel fake or draining, even if they used to be familiar or easy? Have you begun to value solitude over chaos, reflection over distraction, meaning over mindless entertainment? That's not weakness or detachment. It's spiritual growth. You're vibrating on a higher frequency, and that energy naturally creates a boundary between you and what no longer serves your evolution. In fact, this depth you're stepping into can make others uncomfortable. People might accuse you of being distant or intense, when in truth, you're simply committed to living with depth and authenticity. You're starting to ask bigger questions. Who am I, really, beneath all the layers? What legacy do I want to leave behind? These aren't just spiritual questions, they're life-defining ones, and asking them means you've stopped running from yourself. Let me share a story of someone I once knew, a man in his 40s, working a corporate job, socially successful, but spiritually numb. One day, during a routine walk, something cracked open in him. He couldn't explain it, but he knew something had to change. He left the job, took time off, started journaling, exploring dreams, and reading Jung's work. He later said, I stopped being who I thought the world wanted me to be and started becoming who I really was. That's individuation in action. It's messy, raw, but deeply transformative. So let me ask you, what parts of yourself have you outgrown? And which parts are quietly asking to be seen? Because this process isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. And that wholeness is what makes you powerful, magnetic, and frankly, a little too much for people still clinging to the surface. But that's okay. You weren't made to fit into shallow waters when your soul is an ocean. So as you continue on this path of spirituality and spiritual growth, remember that depth is your strength, not your flaw. Live your truth even when it's uncomfortable. Speak from the soul even when others only want small talk. And trust that this sacred journey of becoming your truest self is not only worth it, it's exactly what you came here to do. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we've explored in this video, Carl Jung's insights reveal that vibrating at a higher frequency is not a flaw. It's a sign of deep spiritual awakening and inner transformation. If you've recognized these 11 signs in yourself, know that you're not alone. You're evolving into your truest self. Most people may not understand your energy, but your soul's alignment is its own kind of wisdom. Which of these signs resonated most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And if this message spoke to your journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here at Spiritual Wisdom as we continue to grow together. That exhaustion you feel, it's not your body, it's your shadow. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung, welcome to Spiritual Wisdom. Today, we're diving deep into a truth that most people overlook. Your exhaustion might not be physical, it might be spiritual. What if your burnout isn't just about doing too much, but about suppressing too much? According to Jung, the hidden cause may be your shadow self, the parts of you you've rejected, ignored, or silenced. This isn't just psychology, it's spiritual wisdom in action. Are you ready to face the part of you that's been crying out for attention beneath the surface? Drop a comment below. I'm ready to meet my shadow. And let's begin this journey of real healing and self-reclamation together. 1. Soul-level exhaustion isn't physical. It's psychological and spiritual. There is a kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. It's not in your muscles, not in your bones. It's rooted in your soul. You wake up tired, go through the day on autopilot, and collapse into bed, wondering why rest never feels like recovery. This isn't about overwork or lack of sleep. It's about something deeper, more invisible, and far more powerful. It's the fatigue that comes from living a life that isn't truly yours. Men are often expected to be steady, helpful, agreeable, and the one who holds everything together. So you learn to wear a mask. You suppress your irritation, swallow your anger, silence your needs. You show up for everyone but yourself. You become the dependable one, the strong one, the fixer. And while the world might thank you for that, your inner world begins to crack. That quiet ache behind your smile, that's not a weakness. That's the soul calling out from beneath the persona you've been forced to perform. Carl Jung called this the price of repressing the shadow of the hidden, rejected parts of ourselves that society tells us to bury. Your shadow holds everything you've been taught to hide: your rage, your desire, your grief, your needs. It's everything you couldn't be because you were too busy becoming what others needed. But what you repress doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits in the dark corners of your psyche, feeding on your silence, draining your energy. And one day, It speaks not in words, but in symptoms. Burnout, numbness, emotional fatigue. That's not your body breaking down. That's your soul screaming through it. This kind of tiredness is spiritual. It's psychological. It's the cost of not living in alignment with who you truly are. Jung warned that the unconscious, if left unexamined, will run your life, and you will call it fate. But what if the life you think you're meant to live is just a long reaction to what you were told was acceptable? What if the very things you pushed away, your boldness, your truth, your sadness, are the keys to your vitality? When you push your shadow into hiding, you don't become stronger, you become divided. And it is this internal split that slowly bleeds your energy dry. Healing begins not when you try to escape the exhaustion, but when you recognize its root. The answer is not more rest, it's more truth. It's not more time off, it's more inner alignment. The moment you stop pretending, stop performing, and start reclaiming the parts of yourself you once abandoned, that's when your energy begins to return. Not because life is easier, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. Your burnout isn't a flaw to fix, it's a message to hear. It's your soul reminding you that being endlessly helpful, agreeable, and pleasant at the cost of your truth is not sustainable. It's a quiet protest from the self you left behind. And the path to wholeness begins the moment you stop ignoring it. Because the real reason you're so tired, it's not your body, it's your shadow. And it's been waiting for you to come home. Have you ever felt tired in your soul, not your body? If this kind of exhaustion speaks to you, share your experience in the comments so others know they're not alone. And if you're just beginning to explore this deeper kind of fatigue, simply comment, "I'm listening." Let's start this healing journey together. 2. Repression of the shadow drains psychic energy. Carl Jung taught that libido is not merely sexual energy, but the total psychic energy that fuels our ability to live, create, and connect with others. Every time you suppress your truth to avoid conflict, nod along to please others, or silence your needs to maintain harmony, you're not keeping the peace, you're spending energy. Not physical energy, but something far more precious, your soul's vitality. That fatigue you feel at the end of the day, the heaviness behind your smile, the emptiness even after a full night's rest. It may not be stress or burnout from work. It may be the cost of living a life too far from your real self. This is what happens when you live through your persona, the mask you wear to be agreeable, helpful, and socially acceptable. You start mistaking performance for presence. You play the role so well that even you forget it's a role. But the body remembers. And so does the shadow, the hidden part of you that holds your unmet needs, your anger, your instincts, your passion. The more you exile this part, the more exhausted you become. Because repression is not passive. It requires constant psychic labor. It's like holding a door shut with all your strength while something powerful keeps pushing from the other side. Eventually, your arms tremble. Your focus slips. You burn out, not from too much activity, but from too much pretending. Take a man like Jason, calm, dependable, always the one who smoothed things over. At work, he was the go-to guy for peacekeeping. At home, he never raised his voice. Everyone admired his composure. But deep down, Jason was numb. He couldn't feel joy, couldn't sleep without a glass of wine, and couldn't remember the last time he felt truly alive. That's because he was living in exile from his own soul. His libido, his life force, wasn't gone. It was trapped inside the shadow he'd locked away long ago in the name of being nice. Carl Jung warned that this is the most energy-intensive work a human being can do, to suppress the truth of who they are. And when the shadow can no longer speak through words, it speaks through the body, through burnout, illness, and chronic fatigue. These aren't weaknesses, they are signals. Signals that the price of your persona has become too high, that the energy you're spending on being liked is costing you the energy to be whole. The path forward is not about abandoning kindness or becoming selfish. It's about integration. It's about making space for your entire self, especially the parts you were told were too much, too angry, too sensitive, too honest. You do not need to dismantle your life to begin this healing. You only need to tell yourself the truth. Where do you feel the most drained? Who do you become when you're trying to be accepted? What part of you is always waiting for permission to speak? The answers to these questions are the keys to your vitality. The more honest you are, the more energy you reclaim. Your shadow is not the enemy. It's your buried power. And your exhaustion is not a flaw. It's a clue. 3. The nice person role is energetically unsustainable. You've spent so much of your life trying to be the good one, the kind one, the agreeable one, the peacemaker, and no one ever told you how spiritually expensive that role would become. Day after day, you monitor the emotional landscape of every room you walk into, adjusting yourself to make others comfortable. You anticipate their reactions before you speak. You avoid saying no because you don't want to hurt feelings, and you bury your frustration so deeply that you start forgetting it was ever there. But your body hasn't forgotten. Your soul hasn't forgotten. And the exhaustion you carry is not from your schedule. It's from the performance. Carl Jung warned that what we repress becomes our shadow, and what we repress will eventually find a way to express itself, usually through discomfort, burnout, or breakdown. So while you smile and nod, while you make everyone else feel safe, while you play the role of the emotionally responsible adult in every relationship, your inner world starts to crumble. You become like a beach ball held beneath the surface, colorful on the outside, but under incredible pressure. It takes so much effort to keep it submerged, and the moment you relax, it comes flying back up. That beach ball is your shadow. It's your anger, your truth, your unmet needs, your desire to be seen as more than just the strong one. And every time you push it back down, you lose spiritual energy you need to create, to heal, to grow. That's why you're tired, even after a full night of sleep. That's why you feel hollow, even when nothing is technically wrong. That's why you smile, while secretly wishing someone would just ask, "How are you really?" But no one asks, because you've trained the world to believe you're always fine. You've become the therapist, the fixer, the reliable one. And in the process, you've abandoned the parts of you that need to be held, to be listened to be angry, to be real. This isn't about being selfish. This is about being whole. Spiritual healing doesn't come from being more accommodating. It comes from integrating what you've rejected. You cannot truly awaken until you've embraced the parts of you that you've disowned. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That darkness is not evil. It's an unexpressed truth. When you finally acknowledge the part of you that's tired of being agreeable, that's resentful of always giving, that's screaming behind your smile, you begin to reclaim your soul. You begin to understand that your burnout isn't a weakness. It's wisdom. It's your shadow telling you that the nice person costume no longer fits, that the performance is over, and it's time to come home to yourself. The spiritual path is not about perfection. It's about honesty. It's about removing the mask and saying, "This is me, whole, messy, divine." And in that space of truth, something miraculous happens and your energy begins to return. Your clarity sharpens. Your intuition strengthens. Because when your shadow is no longer a prisoner, your soul becomes free. So let go of the idea that being kind means being silent, that being spiritual means being passive, and that being a good person means being drained. You are allowed to say no without guilt. You are allowed to disappoint others in order to remain in alignment with yourself. And you are allowed required to honor your shadow if you want to live a life of spiritual integrity and true vitality. Because the real burnout isn't caused by doing too much. It's caused by abandoning too much of yourself. Are you tired of playing the nice person at the cost of your own energy? If you're ready to reclaim your boundaries and speak your truth, comment below. I choose authenticity to begin your journey toward freedom and spiritual alignment. 4. Case study: Karen, the saint who's spiritually depleted. Karen's life looks admirable from the outside. She's warm, generous, always available. She never says no, never causes conflict, and never voices her true frustrations. But behind the praise and the polished surface is a soul that's quietly withering. She wakes up tired, not because she slept too little, but because her energy is bleeding from wounds she's been taught to ignore. Her fatigue is not physical, it's spiritual. This is not just tiredness. This is psychic depletion. Carl Jung warned that repressing the shadow self, the anger, the desires, the truth we've been conditioned to hide, is one of the most draining things a human can do. And that's exactly what's happening to Karen. Every time she smiles when she wants to scream, agrees when she wants to refuse, or gives when she has nothing left, she chips away at her vitality. Her exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from being too little of who she truly is. The persona Jung said is the mask we wear to fit in. It's necessary but dangerous when over-identified with. Karen has become her mask. Her real self, the one with needs, instincts, and boundaries, has been silenced for so long that it only speaks now through fatigue, through the dull ache in her chest, through the brain fog that no supplement can fix. There is an energy leak within her, a spiritual hemorrhage that sleep cannot seal. And it's not unique to her. Many men live the same way. You work hard, provide, stay calm, keep the peace, but inside, something is dying. Not because you're weak, but because you're lying to yourself. You've cut off a part of your being, and that fragment the shadow demands to be felt. It doesn't care about politeness or success. It wants the truth. And until you face it, your soul will continue to cry out through your body. Karen's case is not about burnout from labor. It's about burnout from inauthenticity, from never allowing herself to be whole. She's not just tired, she's spiritually malnourished. Her shadow has become louder, not through words, but through symptoms. Her life is proof that ignoring the shadow doesn't make it disappear. It just changes the way it speaks. Through her story, we see a truth many avoid, that sometimes the most exhausting thing we do is pretend. Healing doesn't begin with more sleep, another vacation, or better time management. It begins with a reckoning, with asking yourself, where have I betrayed my own soul to be who the world wanted me to be? That question is the beginning of reclaiming your power. Because the soul cannot thrive in hiding. It only breathes in truth. 5. Fatigue is a sacred signal, not a flaw. Your exhaustion is not a weakness. It is sacred intelligence speaking through your body. It's not laziness, not failure, not some flaw in your personality. It is your soul signaling that something is profoundly off course. And as Carl Jung warned, what you suppress doesn't disappear. It becomes the shadow. That shadow is not just a metaphor. It's the container where your unspoken anger, buried needs, and silenced truth live. Quietly consuming your energy every day, you pretend they're not there. The more you smile through pain, say yes when you mean no, or silence your boundaries to be liked or accepted, the more you create a split inside yourself, and that inner split demands enormous energy to maintain. You wake up tired, not because you didn't sleep enough, but because you've spent years managing two versions of yourself, the one you present to the world and the one hidden in the dark, asking to be seen. There's a man who wakes up every morning, puts on a suit, kisses his kids, and drives to work with a hollow ache in his chest. Everyone says he's dependable, kind, the guy you can count on, but no one sees how crushed he feels inside. He doesn't know why he snaps at small things, or why joy feels like a distant memory. He thinks maybe he just needs a vacation, but what he really needs is integration. His burnout is not about overwork, it's about oversuppression. His soul is asking for truth, for permission to feel, for space to finally be honest. And until he gives that to himself, no amount of rest will bring him peace. Carl Jung made it clear, the shadow is not evil. It's simply the part of you you've not yet made conscious. And repressing it is one of the most exhausting things a human being can do. When you push away your anger, your grief, your desires, they don't leave. They live underground, pulling at your energy like invisible weights. This is why so many people feel tired all the time and can't explain it. Because they're not just tired, they're divided. And division creates suffering. But healing begins when you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what truth am I afraid to face? Your burnout is a message, not a malfunction. It's your shadow asking you to stop performing, to stop hiding, to stop sacrificing your real self for an image that pleases others. You don't need to become someone else. You need to become whole. And that begins by letting yourself feel what you feel, need what you need, and speak what you've been too afraid to say. Your exhaustion is not the enemy. It's the doorway. It's the threshold between the false self and the true self. Let it guide you. Let it soften you. Let it lead you back to the places within that you once abandoned. As Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Don't be one of them. The real cure for burnout is not more sleep, it's more truth. Let your soul rest by letting it speak. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What is your body trying to tell you right now? Let's honor our exhaustion, not as failure, but as sacred guidance. on the path of spiritual awakening. 6. 3 core messages from your shadow. Through exhaustion. Unexpressed anger is not just an emotional issue, it is a spiritual weight. Every time you silence your rage to appear agreeable, every time you smile while your boundaries are being violated, you're using an immense amount of psychic energy to suppress what needs to be acknowledged. Carl Jung warned us that what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. When you hold in your anger, it doesn't disappear. It transforms into exhaustion. It becomes chronic fatigue, irritation, restlessness, and even depression. It's like pressing down on a spring all day eventually. Your entire being tires from the force of resistance. Your burnout isn't laziness or weakness. It's the spiritual cost of denying a part of yourself that demands to be heard. And it doesn't stop there. Your soul has emotional and spiritual needs, just like your body needs food. If you're constantly pouring into others, showing up for everyone else, offering kindness and strength while never receiving the same for yourself, you will slowly deplete. Your soul needs solitude, silence, inspiration, and joy to thrive. Without these, you experience what can only be described as spiritual malnutrition. The symptoms are subtle. You stop laughing. You stop dreaming. You lose interest in things that once lit you up. The inner world begins to fade, replaced by obligation and performance. You forget the last time you created for fun, rested without guilt, or felt truly alive. Your spirit, once vibrant, becomes weary, not because you are broken, but because you are spiritually starved. The third and most devastating root of this deep exhaustion is living in misalignment with your true self. When your life is dictated by others' opinions, when you suppress your own voice to win approval, when your days are filled with roles you never chose, your soul begins to rebel. This rebellion doesn't look like fire and chaos. It shows up as numbness, as fatigue that won't go away, as a sense of drifting through life, never quite arriving anywhere. You feel like you're swimming against the current of your own being. Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And when you live inauthentically, when you betray yourself just to be accepted, your soul sends signals. Burnout is one of those signals. It is not your body giving up. It is your spirit screaming that something is deeply wrong. This is not just mental or emotional exhaustion. It is a spiritual collapse. The shadow self, everything you've rejected, hidden, or disowned, isn't trying to ruin you. It is trying to wake you up. It speaks through weariness, through the weight in your chest, through the tears that rise for no reason. Integration is the path to healing. You must stop hiding from the parts of yourself you were taught to fear, because in truth, they hold the very energy, creativity, and power you've been missing. You are not broken. You are spiritually imbalanced from pretending too long. And the only way back is through honest self-inquiry and radical alignment with your soul. Let the shadow speak. Let your spirit breathe again. 7. 3 transformative practices to begin healing. The exhaustion you feel is not laziness, and it's not something you can fix with just a good night's sleep. It's deeper than that. It's the ache of your soul quietly asking you to stop pretending. You've spent years being the strong one, the dependable one, the man who doesn't complain. But beneath that calm exterior is a storm of unmet needs, unspoken truths, and a shadow you've worked tirelessly to suppress. Carl Jung warned us that what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. And for many men, this resistance becomes the root of burnout, not just a tired body, but a tired identity. Healing starts not with doing more, but with remembering who you are beneath the noise. The first practice that initiates this healing is the sigh of surrender, a double inhale followed by a long, slow exhale while silently saying, "I surrender. I am ready to listen." It's not just a breath, it's a signal to your nervous system that the war within is ending. Your body, which has carried so much tension and false strength, finally gets to soften, to release the armor you've worn for too long. And in that moment of breath, your soul speaks not through words, but through relief. This is followed by the practice of journaling to your fatigue, where you sit with your exhaustion not as a weakness to push through, but as a wise messenger. Write to it. Ask questions like, "What are you trying to protect me from?" Or, "What have I been ignoring?" Let it speak back without censorship. This isn't about crafting perfect sentences. It's about creating a dialogue with the part of you that has been silenced in your pursuit of being strong. You'll be surprised what your soul reveals when given permission to speak without judgment. The third practice is guilt-free rest, which may sound simple, but for many men, it's the hardest. Rest has been tied to guilt, to laziness, to failure. But true rest, the kind that restores your soul, is not a break from productivity. It's an act of remembrance. When you schedule time to do absolutely nothing, not to recover for more hustle, but because your soul deserves space to breathe, you are declaring to the world that your worth is not tied to your output. You are not a machine. You are not a checklist. You are a soul in a human body, and that soul needs stillness. These practices are not luxuries. They are acts of courage. In a society that celebrates burnout as a badge of honor, choosing to breathe, to write, and to rest becomes a radical return to self. And in that return, you'll find a man who is no longer chasing validation or hiding his pain. You'll find someone grounded, awake, and no longer ruled by the shadow he once feared. The exhaustion doesn't disappear overnight, but when you stop running from it and start listening to it, you begin to shift. You stop surviving and start remembering. And that remembrance is where the soul finally begins to heal. As we explore these 3 transformative healing practices, take a moment to honor your own journey. Your presence here is a sign that you're ready to listen to your body, speak to your soul, and rest without guilt. If you're committed to this path of deep self-care, comment below, "I am ready to heal from within," as a declaration of your inner shift. Let this be your first step toward wholeness. 8. Shadow work begins with listening, not fighting. You think you're just tired, but no amount of sleep seems to help. You wake up drained, carry a heaviness you can't explain, and tell yourself to push through. But this exhaustion isn't physical, it's spiritual. Carl Jung warned that the greatest drain on our energy doesn't come from work or effort. It comes from denying who we are. Shadow work begins not with fixing or fighting, but with listening. Listening to the quiet ache that says you've been showing up for everyone but yourself. Listening to the sighs you suppress, the anger you swallow, the needs you minimize. That bone-deep tiredness is not laziness. It's the consequence of living in a way that's misaligned with your soul. And the moment you stop resisting it and begin listening is the moment you reclaim your power. When you give yourself permission to rest, to feel, to say no, the energy you once used to suppress yourself becomes available for living more authentically. Karen used to be the nice one, helpful, agreeable, always available. But beneath her smile was a soul worn thin. Her body spoke first. Tension, fatigue, disinterest. She thought she just needed a vacation, but what she really needed was the truth. So she paused. She stopped volunteering on autopilot. She let silence fill the space where guilt used to speak. She picked up her old guitar and began playing again, not for anyone, just for herself. She wrote down her feelings, even the uncomfortable ones. She stopped saying yes when her body whispered no. Slowly, the joy returned. Not the kind you fake in public, but the kind that sneaks up on you when you're finally free. Her kindness didn't disappear. It deepened. It wasn't about obligation anymore. It came from alignment, from the soul. That's what Carl Jung meant by integration. Not perfection, but wholeness. The truth is, burnout is the receipt for abandoning yourself. Every time you perform instead of express, agree instead of feel, please instead of honor, you pay in energy. And eventually, the cost is too high. So you renegotiate. You write a new contract with your life. My needs are valid, my rest is sacred, and I will not sacrifice myself to be understood. This isn't a quick fix. It's a slow unraveling of the masks you wear. It's choosing honesty over approval, peace over performance, soul over survival. And it begins now. Not with a resolution, but with one sacred choice. The sigh, the journal, or the rest. One breath that says, I am here. One truth on paper that says, this is how I feel. One quiet moment that says, I don't need to earn this pause. That's how the healing begins, not with force, but with presence. The more you listen, the more energy returns. Not energy to hustle, but to be. That's the true cure for burnout. To stop abandoning yourself and to remember the life you were meant to live. As we've explored today, the exhaustion you feel might not just be physical. It could be your shadow self calling out for your attention. Carl Jung reminds us that what we repress does not disappear. It only grows heavier in the dark. True healing begins when you stop running from yourself and start listening to the parts you've ignored. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. What part of you have you silenced for too long? If you found value in this video, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights like this. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next awakening. Your journey inward is the most powerful journey of all. Keep walking it with courage